There it goes, okay. See, we probably hit it and I forgot to turn it on again, like I did last time. So we gossip about people all the time. Our behaviors are guided a great deal by what others around us are doing. The clothes that we wear, very similar. Everybody's got the same pants on. I've got jeans on today, so I'm with it today. I have running shoes on. How's that? Yeah, so I'm one of the group, one of the gang. Yeah, okay, I'm there. Okay. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt just like all of you guys. Okay, there you go. And we learn to imitate others. So who am I imitating? Who wears Hawaiian shirts on Thursdays besides me? Am I the only one? Do you know anybody else that wears Hawaiian shirts? Not a damn, I'm sorry, not anybody, huh? Oh well. Okay, this is a piece of research, really fascinating research. They wanted to compare humans to other primates. So what they did, this was in 2012, Dean and his group compared a 2.5-year-old child to a chimpanzee and an orangutan. And he gave them tasks to do. He gave them social tasks and he gave them physical tasks. And the physical tasks were relatively easy. Well, they were so easy that the orangutans and the humans, the orangutans, the chimpanzees, and the humans did it at about the same rate, about 75%. So there you go, humans and orangutans and chimpanzees. If it's a physical problem, we will solve the problem about at the same rate. However, then they gave them a social problem. Now, of course, orangutans and chimpanzees, they have a different social structure than humans do. Humans imitate people, and chimpanzees and orangutans emulate people. So they look at things from a environmental context, and we look at things from a specific context. So when they gave them a social problem, the humans solved the problem 100% of the time. It's not on this page. Anyway, oh, well, that's where I talked about this. Okay. And I put the picture of Charlton Heston kissing in Planet of the Apes. He's kissing the chimpanzee lady. Yes, humorous is that. I just thought that was funny. Oh, monkey kisser. Okay, there we go. Most of the humans scored 100% on social problems, while most of the apes scored 0%. So they emulate, so they couldn't do it. We imitate, so we could do it. And we were successful. The humans were successful. I think I can call myself a human. Okay. And the apes were unsuccessful. So no matter how reclusive an individual or a group of humans are, culture and biology of the human brain are bound inextricably. There's nothing we can do about it. We are the same all around the world, whether we are a group of natives living in the Amazon Valley, or headhunters in Borneo, or somebody in New York City. We're all social creatures. We are cultural species. And we follow our own culture, as interesting as the blue people are. The Blue Man Group. You've heard of the Blue Man Group? No? Yeah, they play the drums. They play everything. They play pipes. They're fun, aren't they? Has anybody ever seen the Blue Man Group? Oh, they're great. They used to be on television like all the time, and now all of a sudden they're not. There's like 7 different groups of them or something. Anyway, that's the end of chapter 2. So that's where we should be right now. I'm going to jump ahead to chapter 3. I'm ahead, so you can tell all your friends that I'm actually ahead in a class. It doesn't happen very often. As a matter of fact, it almost never happens. Ask anybody. I almost never finish all my lectures. Okay. So we're going to talk about cultural evolution, which is going to be a lot of fun, or not. Different environments affect people, the ways that people go about living their lives. I told you that I lived in a cornfield. I live in it's actually soybeans this year, it's not corn. You guys live in the desert. I don't care. You can live, you may think you live in a cornfield, but you don't. I actually live in a cornfield. And it is green. Now, it will be until they harvest, of course. Well, it's soybeans right now. What am I talking about? And they always harvest soybeans before corn. They allow the corn to dry. It has to dry on the stalk. So they'll probably start harvesting corn maybe in the end of September, beginning of October. The soybeans, on the other hand, will probably be harvested closer to the middle of September, and they should have all the soybeans in before they even start harvesting the corn. But you guys don't know anything about that because you don't live around soybeans and you don't live around corn. My environment is one thing and your environment is totally different. So as I was wandering around the world thinking, oh my God, what horrible soil. You couldn't grow anything here. As I was wandering around the world in Japan and Korea, the ground is yellow. It's yellow. I know. What can you grow in yellow dirt? I don't know. It didn't look like very good dirt, but they were growing rice in it. They would flood it and they would grow rice. Anyway, as I was wandering around, I used to live in Lubbock, Texas. I lived there for 7 years. Lived in Germany for 3. Lived in Ohio for a while. Lived in California. It's too crowded there. Lived in Texas 4 times. Lived in where else did I live? Montana. The dirt up in Montana is not very good. I don't know why they try to grow things up there. The wheat that they grow in Montana, it's hard, it's small grains. I don't even know why they do it. I mean, the wheat that you see in Indiana and Illinois and Ohio, much better wheat. You wouldn't want to make flour out of the wheat from Montana. I don't know what they do with it. Anyway, the environment that you live in has to do with the way that you what are we talking about? The way that you live your life. And I've always loved tractors. The reason I love tractors is because I grew up with a tractor. When I go home this weekend, I'm going to have to drive the tractor. My wife told me, you have to drive the tractor before you put it away. And she can't drive the tractor. She's never driven a tractor before. So I get to jump up on my Farmall and drive it. It's a 48 Farmall Cub. I know, it's a classic. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it, driving my tractor. Some of the ways that physical environments affect culture are quite direct. If you live in Hawaii, on the Hawaiian Islands, the biggest animal on the Hawaiian Islands is this goose. So if you're a hunter and you go to the Hawaiian Islands, there's not much to shoot. It's called the nene. It's really kind of an interesting bird. It's even smaller than the Canada goose or the snow goose. It kind of looks like a snow goose. It's about the same height. It's got a shorter neck. You know what I'm talking about? We have swans in Iowa. We have swans, trumpeter swans. Their necks are like this long. They are so cool. And their bodies are like a turkey. They're really big. Anyway, but if I go to Hawaii and I'm a hunter, what am I going to hunt? Birds, butterflies, maybe? I could hunt the Hawaiian monk seal. If I were a hunter in Hawaii, what am I afraid of? Am I brave because I'm hunting the goose? With my little bow and arrow? What's the danger of hunting a goose? He might fly up and, poop on me or something. I know, it's so dangerous. Or I could hunt the seal. By golly, if I miss him with the first shot, he'll jump in the water and I might get splashed in the face. So the whole lifestyle of a hunter doesn't exist on Hawaii. They don't hunt. There's nothing to hunt. However, if we go someplace else, like the Kalahari Desert, you've got a lot of antelope to hunt. Potentially, you could hunt the elephant, but they don't because they're just too big and difficult to kill. But you have all these antelope to hunt. You have to protect yourself from other predators like leopards and lions. Lion prides. We're not just talking about a lion, we're talking about groups of lions, whole families of lions. Leopards, of course, hunt singularly, but the lion hunts in groups. So if you're a hunter in Africa, that means something. If you're a hunter in Hawaii, that means you chase geese, I guess. Or seals. I'm not sure. Anyway, So most of the caloric intake of the hunter groups of the Hung comes from these antelopes that they kill. One of the interesting things about these individuals is that they have poison arrows, and that's what they used to kill them with. So they not only need to be able to hit them, but they also need to be able to run fast enough to chase down the meat and wait until it dies. And this is what they do. They'll track a wounded animal for an extended length of time. They don't try to kill it with the first shot. They don't try to make a headshot. They try to just hit it. There's poison in the arrow will eventually poison the animal, and the animal will drop. So they have to be able to track the animal. So that's what hunting in the Kalahari means. And they have a strong hunting tradition in the Kalahari Desert. The kinds of foods that are available within a given ecology affect the kinds of foraging behaviors that people engage in. And of course, this has a squirrel in it. Has anybody ever eaten squirrel? Tastes like rabbit. Have you ever eaten rabbit? Right? Tastes like chicken. I know, they all taste the same. It's all dark meat. Squirrels are all dark meat, but so are rabbits. It's all dark meat. You know, you eat a chicken, and the chicken breast is white, and the rest of it's dark, right? Turkey, okay, but squirrel's all dark meat. Now the sad thing about a squirrel is that it's a rodent, just like a rat or a mouse. So I don't know if you want to eat them or not. We had lots of. This is a fox squirrel. We had lots of fox squirrels where I came from. So it all depends on where you are. If you live in Indiana, I told you last time, I picked raspberries. My wife was incapacitated, but I picked raspberries for a month. And we made raspberry pies. And when I go home, I'll probably have a raspberry pie. We picked cherries for about 3 weeks. We could pick apples for about 6 weeks. So those are the foods that we would eat if we didn't go to the store and find foods. Now these are kind of interesting little berries. Does anybody know what these are? Has anybody ever seen anything like this? See, we need Andrea here. She's from Montana. Those are June berries. They're little tiny berries. And what they'll do is they'll take them and they'll make a soup out of them. Wow, talk about sweet. It's sweet. According to Gilmore in 1990, in those cultures where the environment is harsh and requires courage and physical prowess to secure a living, cultures of masculinity that value the strength and the toughness of males are more likely to emerge. So where you have a hunting community, where you have a hunting lifestyle, then masculinity is very important. You don't want your women going out and hunting because it's too dangerous. And we don't care if men get killed, but we really care if our reproductive females get killed because she represents a baby. He represents, well, maybe nothing, right? So men are expendable and women aren't. So in most masculine cultures, women are very important. Women are important in all cultures. But especially they are especially important in strong masculine cultures because in those cultures it is so dangerous that the men very often don't come back. In which case, or at least we have the babies, right? That's all we care about is the babies. Maybe we don't have as much food as we would have had before, but we still have the babies. And the babies are far more important than the men are. Literally. And that's one of the reasons why for the last 10,000 years, who goes off to war? You put a regiment of ladies together and put them in the front. Vanguard, they're the ones that are going to die first. First to die, there we go. We put the ladies up there. Is that what we do? Have we ever done that? Has any culture ever done that? Some cultures have had female warriors, but they tend to be, even in those cultures, it was relatively few and far between. It was mostly the men that did the fighting and dying. And that's okay, because men aren't worth very much. We're expendable. All we need to do, reproduction only takes not that long, and once that's over with, the woman needs to stick around and have the baby. It takes her 9 months. So that's what's important. The babies are important. Now, it's important that the baby has some genes, but your job's over with. And she's got 9 whole months of work to do, and you got nothing to do, so, or except to feed her. You got to feed that lady. Anyway, this is really kind of interesting. So even in a masculine culture, the females are extremely important. So where do we have these masculine cultures? Any place that has large game, like the Great Plains, both the southern plains and the northern plains, lots of buffalo herds. The buffalo herds were especially heavy up north, and the reason they were heavier up north is because of they had grasslands, and they wintered up in the Yellowstone. They actually wintered up in Canada as well. So these buffalo herds were massive, and of course, so the tribes up there became buffalo hunters. And they killed them in various ways. Before they had horses, they used to run them off cliffs and then butcher as many of them as they wanted, and they had what they needed. So where we have large game, like in the Kalahari, like in the American West, places where risky deep-sea fishing is performed. This is actually not deep-sea fishing, but you can see that looks kind of dangerous to me anyway. Any place that where the individual might potentially die. We had strong masculine cultures in those areas. On the South Pacific island of Truk, men traditionally had to go on dangerous deep-sea fishing expeditions to secure food for their families. The Truckees greatly value masculinity, which is manifested by young men engaging in frequent violent drunken melees with knives and clubs. They try to kill each other. As stupid as this. Men, I swear, aren't they the dumbest people in the world? I know, we'll see who's got the biggest club, okay? My knife is sharper than your knife, okay. In Tahiti, on the other hand, Tahiti, you really don't have to go anyplace to find food. It has a shallow lagoon, and there are just tons and tons of fish in the lagoon. So you didn't really have to go and challenge yourself out in the ocean as to whether you could find food or not. There was lots of food there. One of the reasons they call the South Pacific Paradise is because not only was there fish in the lagoons, but there was also fruit growing readily on land. Just lots and lots of food. You didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was live. Kind of cool. And nobody was challenging you. There's no reason for one guy to wrestle with another guy, unless they were after the same girlfriend. Then potentially they would wrestle. But other than that, I mean, there was really no danger. It wasn't dangerous at all. Men in Tahiti did not need to hunt and fish, because fish are readily available in the shallow lagoons, and all you have to do is walk out there and grab one. And that's it. I mean, literally, that's the way it is. Not much to it. There is virtually no warfare and feuding on Tahiti, and there is little evidence that masculinity is a matter of much concern with the Tahitians. So one guy doesn't really try to outbox another guy. It really wasn't important. The harsher the environment and the scarcer the resources, the more manhood is stressed. Environment shapes lifestyle, and that's the whole point of this, is that the environment will shape what lifestyle you have. So what the hell's going on? I'm sorry, what's going on with the Europeans? Why were they so violent? What was wrong with those guys? When they came over here, all they wanted to do was fight. They wanted to fight and conquer. What's with that? Why were they acting that way? What's wrong with Europe? What kind of environment is Europe that you're such a violent person? The people from the north. the Northmen, the Norsemen, the Vikings were always raiding down south. They would get in their longboats and they would come down south and they would raid. So if you lived close to the ocean, which was the best place to get food, if you live close to the ocean, by golly, one of these guys might come over, or one of these groups might come over, one of these Viking raiding parties might come over, and they might kill all your men and take away all your women and steal all your food. That's one of the things that was going on. And even if you weren't close to the ocean and had to deal with the Vikings, you still had to deal with another army from the north, the south, the east, the west. Somebody was coming over and trying to steal your food. Everybody's always looking for food. So Europe developed as this warring mass of people. They were in constant warfare. And then they came up with a religion. Europe was, the religion of Europe was a form of Christianity. And Christianity told you that if somebody didn't believe the way you did, then you had to convert them. And if you couldn't convince them just by talking to them, then you had to convert them physically. You had to fight them. And that might potentially convert them. So we had all this warfare taking place, and a lot of it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then the Catholic Church, it wasn't the Catholic Church, the church split in two. It split into the Orthodox group and it split into the Catholic group. And then the Catholic group split into the Protestant group and the Catholic group. So now we've got three different groups of individuals, and none of them like each other very much because their way is the right way. Well, how many right ways can there possibly be? One, of course. I know, so they started attacking each other. Then the Muslims came up from the south. My goodness. The Tatars came over from Asia. Oh my goodness. All this warfare, this constant warfare going on in Europe. So they got in ships and left to Europe, this fighting, this warring land, and they came over here. In 1532, Juan Pizarro conquered the Incans. Juan Pizarro had 168 men, or was it? Yeah, 168 soldiers. Peru probably had 3-4 million. Not soldiers, but 3 or 4 million people. He had thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers. And Juan Pizarro was able to conquer him. Atahualpa was the emperor of Peru. And he was in their first battle, the Spaniards killed 7,000 soldiers. It was a butcher. It was horrible. They only had 168 guys. They lost like 14. And they killed 7,000. Well, that doesn't seem right. What's the difference between the Spaniards and the Peruvians? Why did they win? They should have been annihilated. They should have been butchered, cooked on spits and eaten. No, they didn't do that. Proximal means direct and immediate. Proximal causes of the Spanish success would be that the Spanish political organization drew on thousands of years of not only written history, but also warfare, thousands of years of warfare. They had ocean-going vessels that the Incans didn't have. They had steel swords and armor. Why did they develop steel and armor? Because they'd been fighting constantly for thousands and thousands of years. Not just the Spaniards, but the Brits, the Gauls, the French, the Germans, all those Germans up there, the Swedes, the Poles. All of these people have been fighting each other forever in constant warfare. And the church was part of it. The church was telling them, you've got to do this. It was the church that told the Spanish that they had to conquer everybody in the Americas. They had horses, and there weren't any horses over here. So horses didn't actually come to the Americas until 1500s, 16th century. And they brought over all these diseases. And you guys had no immunity to any of these diseases, especially smallpox. Smallpox just wiped people out, wiped out whole villages of people. And And you did things wrong, okay? When somebody got sick, you should have taken them and thrown them out in the woods. But that's not how you did things. If somebody was sick, everybody would come and they would try to help that person. And so you got the whole extended family. And now guess what happens? Everybody in the Hogan gets sick. That's the way it works. So they all die. I know, it's horrible. Distal means long-term and indirect. The Spaniards came from a history of environments with food sources that supported large populations. The Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, that's where wheat came from. Barley, peas, and lentils came from this area. Sheep, goats, pigs, donkeys, and cows came from this area. So they had lots of meat to eat, and it was domesticated, so they didn't have to hunt it. They didn't have to chase it down. It was right there. It was in their corrals, and they butchered it and ate it. Such strong agricultural endeavors enabled the formerly nomadic people to adopt more sedentary lifestyles, which in turn allowed them to seek scientific improvements. And for that reason, of course, they developed steel, they developed armor, and of course, they needed a new way to fight. It's really kind of interesting because the Russians, I just read a book about the Romanovs, and the Russians decided that they were going to get into the wars in Europe. They decided that they were going to fight too. So this was in the 17th century. And the first battle they went into battle with crossbows and spears and some flintlock rifles. And of course they were going up against an army of men with guns. And they lost. They lost very readily. Even though they had 3 times as many men, because their technology was not what the other side was. They were fighting the Swedes, by the way. And the Swedes had a relatively modern army, and they just whipped them to no end. Because, of course, they were fighting them with crossbows. And they were fighting guns versus crossbows, and the Russians just lost big time. And it wasn't until Peter the Great, of course, that they modernized their army. They spent enough money to buy modern weapons. And that's what happened with the Russians. So the Russians were a little behind. And that's one of the reasons why they never conquered Europe. Yeah, they almost kind of just about did back in the War of 1815 when Napoleon was overthrown. They were part of the army that actually conquered Napoleon. The domestication of various animals allowed the people in the Eurasian area to live in close proximity with their animals for thousands of years. They domesticated all these animals, so they lived with them. Animals sometimes have diseases, and these animals had diseases, especially pigs. As it turns out, pigs, swine, have a very similar immune system to humans. So if you live with your pigs, and your pigs have some kind of a swine flu, you've heard of swine flu, if they have some kind of a flu, guess who gets it next? It mutates, and all of a sudden humans can get it. Now, it doesn't happen the first time. It may not happen the first 100 times. But that 101st time, all of a sudden, it mutates to something that will infect humans. And these Europeans lived with their pigs. They still do live with their pigs. You may not realize it or not, but if you are a farmer in Germany, upstairs is where you live, and downstairs is where the pigs live. That's the way it works. I was living in a farming village in Germany, Mauschbach, and down below our house was their barn. I know. Does it stink? No, actually it's not too bad. It's not that bad. But one thing you can do is if you've got wastes, if you've got lettuce that you don't want, or rotten lettuce, or rotten anything, you can throw it down in, there's a hole, they'll have a hole that you can just dump your stuff down there, and the pigs will eat it. So they're eating our waste, as it were, and of course they're getting our diseases, and potentially when we butcher them, we're getting their diseases. So this is the way Europeans did things. Their immune system, the swine immune system, is very much like humans. So as it turned out, we started swapping diseases with the pigs, and that's how measles developed. That's how tuberculosis developed. smallpox, and influenza. And we still get influenza from pigs. Not in the United States. We don't live with our pigs, so we don't develop the influenza, but every year it comes over from Asia because they live with their pigs. In other words, well, actually what they do is they allow their pigs to run around in their fields, and they will fertilize their fields with human waste. And that's where the pigs eat. And pigs will eat just about anything. They're vegetarians, so they eat a lot of roots. So they root around in dirt. That's why they're always so dirty. That and the fact that they have really sensitive skin, so they have to keep their bodies covered with mud. As interesting as that is. Okay, well, I'm sure, unless you've raised pigs, you really have no idea what I'm talking about. But all of these diseases develop from that way of doing things. Has anybody ever lived with pigs? My neighbor had pigs. They stink. But pig manure is smells like human manure, kind of smells like human manure. Pigs also put off pheromones that are very similar to human pheromones. So what they discovered eventually they discovered that men or families that kept boars, the male pig, since the male pig puts off more pheromones than the human does, the human doesn't reproduce as much if they have a boar in the vicinity. I know, it's so bizarre. So, if you know a family of pig raisers, they probably don't have very many kids, if any at all, as strange as that may seem. But people that raise cattle, of course, the cattle don't have anything to do with humans. Their pheromones aren't similar, so they have all the babies in the world. Yeah, okay. So don't raise pigs. And if you do, just raise sows. Don't raise boars. Don't raise the males. For thousands of years, diseases swept through the cities and towns of Eurasia, killing off millions, but leaving populations of people immune to these scourges. This is the reality of Europe. They would have an outbreak of measles, and it would kill off thousands of people, but the thousands that were left over were immune to the measles. Same thing with smallpox. It wasn't that way with the bubonic plague, however. The bubonic plague, you cannot develop immunity to bubonic plague, and of course it just wiped out millions and millions of people in Europe. And luckily it never came over here. Luckily we've never had an outbreak of bubonic plague in the United States. But now, of course, we can eradicate it. Now we know how to fight it. It's really kind of interesting the way it works, but you're probably not that interested. When these diseases were introduced to the uninitiated populations in the Americas, the lack of immunity wiped out whole nations. Almost wiped out the Aztecs. Almost wiped out the Incas. It wiped out all the tribes of the southeast. One of the, I can't even remember his name, was it Pizarro? No, it wasn't Pizarro. Who's the guy? DeSoto, it was DeSoto. Landed in Florida and he walked all the way to Kansas. And so what did he eat while he was on the road? He ate pork. He had pigs. He had a whole bunch of pigs. And the pigs infected the turkeys, as strange as that sounds. Turkeys and pigs have similar immune systems. And the Indians ate the turkeys. Some of the pigs escaped, and they became the Razorbacks of Arkansas. Some of the pigs escaped, but they infected all these turkeys, and the turkeys infected the people, and the people died of all these strange diseases. There was a Frenchman that sailed from down the Mississippi and went east, and he saw all of what was in the southeast. And there was village after village after village after village. It looked like it was so full of people that there was no way that Europeans would find any place to live. A Frenchman came 50 years after Yahoo was down there, DeSoto was down there. A Frenchman went in the same area, there were no people left. They were all gone. They'd all died because the turkeys got infected by the pigs, and the people ate the turkeys, and now we've got a dead population because they became infected with all these diseases that people in the Americas had never seen before. Does all this make sense? You've heard this story before. Probably not the whole pig story. Up north, there's a group of people called the White Clay people. They're also known as the Ani Nin. They're also known as the Groman. If you know this group, they at one point they were one of the most fearsome group of people on the northern plains. Everybody was afraid of them. They were so brave that they would braid their hair with a scalp lock. In other words, they dared you to kill them and scalp them. So when they go to powwows, it's really kind of cool. When they go to powwows, that's how they braid their hair. They'll always give themselves a scalp lock, which is kind of interesting. And daring people to scalp them, as interesting as that is. The White Clay people started out with 600 lodges. And you can multiply that out. There's about 10 to 20 people per lodge. So this is at least 6,000 people, maybe 10,000 people in the White Clay group. Smallpox struck and it killed like practically everybody. And they were down to 60 lodges at one point. And they complain about the fact that so many people died they didn't have any place to bury them. So they started sticking them in trees. They bury them by putting them up. What time do we quit? 2:50, right? Okay. All right. I have a video for you. You might like this video. This is kind of a funny video, if I can get on the internet. China is a large country in Eastern Asia. This is China. In the north, the people eat and grow wheat. In the south, where it's warmer and more humid, they grow rice, and they eat rice, of course. Because there's a vast difference between growing rice and wheat, the two areas have developed different social structures. As odd as that seems. Wait a minute. Okay. Rice is cultivated in paddies. Of course, that has to do with standing water. If you've ever been any place where they grow rice, like Vietnam, we're always walking through the rice paddies. And of course, they also fertilize with human waste, which is always interesting. So walking through the paddies was not the most fun thing in the world. It's like walking through, dog manure or something. It's nasty. Oh man, you want to burn your boots afterwards, but of course you can't because you don't have anything else to wear. There has to be sufficient rainfall, of course, where it is channeled through irrigation canals. This requires a great deal of coordination and cooperation between farmers. So in places where they grow rice, the farmers have to cooperate because they need all this water, and the water comes from a singular source, and everybody needs water. Rice farming is labor intensive, often requiring work by the whole family. Really kind of fascinating to watch whole families out there. You'll have little kids on their back, but as soon as they can stand up, they're planting rice. They're bending over planting rice. As interesting as that is. Now, if you guys did this, had to do this, of course it'd kill your back because you've got long legs. But these guys don't have long legs. Their legs are shorter. From their knee to their ankle is longer. Their thighs are shorter. So it's easy for them to bend over, as interesting as that is. So you see whole families out there planting rice. I can't even bend down that far. And here, these guys, and even grandma and grandpa are out there planting rice. Rice farming is labor intensive and requires the whole families to work, of course. Wheat farming, I don't know if you've ever been around a wheat farmer. Easy stuff, you just throw the grain out there and it grows. Normally, if you have a wheat field, you don't have to irrigate because it's usually in a temperate area, and that's why you're growing wheat. If you had to irrigate, you wouldn't grow it. You grow something else. A wheat farmer does not have to cooperate with his neighbors. He just throws the grain out there, it grows, and then he harvests it. That's the way it works. Sounds easy, doesn't it? It turns out not to be quite that easy. Harvesting's a bit of a trick. Wheat farming is far less labor intensive than growing rice in the rice paddy. This is tough. This is an all-year thing. You're out in the rice paddy all year. Weeding, you can't allow other plants to grow in there. Everything wants to grow in the water. So you can't allow that to happen. So you're out there every day weeding. The wheat field, you just let it grow. And And it does. It just grows like crazy. It's great. So wheat farming is a little bit easier than rice farming. Looking at people from northern and southern China, researchers discovered that rice growers from the south showed more interdependent thinking styles, which makes sense. They saw themselves as part of a network. They were more tolerant of nepotism. They engaged in more holistic reasoning. And of course, this is the video if it works. Let me see if I can get it to work. Oh, it's going to work. Okay. This is in Chinese. And part of it's in English and they swear. So I apologize for that. Wait a minute. There we go. This is a lady from the north.
It's not up there.
Wait a minute. Let's go back a little. Let's go back. Okay, there we go. Oh, you're not seeing it. I'm seeing it. You're not. I'm sorry. This is what happened before. All right. All right. Yeah, you need to. Well, you don't need to. You don't have to. Sorry. I didn't realize what was going on. I've had this problem before. Okay. It's really kind of fascinating to watch it. And it, like I said, it's in Chinese. And then, I don't know. Does anybody speak Mandarin? No? Okay. Does anybody speak Cantonese? No. Okay. And like I said, they only speak English once, and they swear. So, but it's only once in the whole thing. So it's really kind of interesting to watch the difference between people from the north and people from the south. And what you're going to discover is the person from the north acts like maybe somebody from the United States, because they're dependent, they have a lot of self-esteem. The person from the south is very coy, never always covers her mouth when she talks. She's that kind of person. And the lady from the north is somebody tries to take her purse and she smacks it. And the lady from the south, when they take her purse, she goes, "Oh, I'm so sad that I lost my purse." You know, one of those kind of deals. But there really is a difference between the two people. As you can see, they look the same. They look very similar, but they don't act the same. And the reason is because one eats wheat and the other eats rice. Well, that's not really it. What actually happens is the environment of wheat farmers is more independent than rice farmers. And so the people from the rice are more collectivistic, and the people from the north are more individualistic. And that's China. And it's really kind of fascinating, because if you're reading about the history of China, you have to find out where this person comes from. If it's somebody from Shanghai, of course Shanghai's down in the south, they're going to act differently than somebody from Beijing, which is up in the north. It's the northern capital is Beijing. As you see, the people from the north are going to be a little bit more independent. So when they have a revolution in China, it never comes out of the south. It always comes from the north. The communist revolution started in the north. And the people in the south, they're like sheep. They follow everything that happens. Really kind of fascinating. And I'm stuck. Here we go. Come on. There we go. Evoked culture is the idea that people, no matter where they are from have certain biologically encoded behavioral patterns that can be evoked when certain circumstances arise. When threatened, the capacity to act in an intimidating manner is universally present, especially when loved ones are threatened. So if somebody comes to your house and threatens to attack your family, then you're more likely to get on your hind legs and fight that select individual, even though if you don't fight. And that is universal. It's intrinsic. We protect our families. Another example of evoked culture is attractiveness in a mate. People around the world prefer mates who are physically attractive. Attractive people are less likely to have parasites. They're also, they tend to be healthier than people that are unattractive. Thus, humans have inherited preferences for attractive mates. So if you live in a dangerous area, if you live in a place that has parasites, if you live in squalor, then you're more likely to select an attractive mate. Because there's always a danger that this individual is not going to be able to reproduce if they are fragile. So if you're in a dangerous environment, you're more likely to pick a mate that is physically able to take care of themselves. Does that make sense? Now the odd thing is, I just read this history of Russia, and a lot of times they married women from Germany. And when they married the women from Germany, they were marrying women from a different culture. And because it was a different culture, a lot of times nobody in Germany wanted them. But the Russians did, because the Russian environment was totally different. So they were able to, if they had stayed in Germany, they may not have ever gotten married, they may have never had any children, but because the Russians were selecting them for another type of environment, they married people that were unacceptable to the Germans. So they went to Germany. So the Russian aristocracy actually started mixing with German with German princesses very early in the 16th century, and they followed that trend all the way through until they lost the monarchy in 1917. They married Germans, so the Russian czars would marry Germans. So eventually, of course, the Russian czars weren't Russian hardly at all, just un poquito, just a very little bit, because they kept mixing with German princesses. So the first guy that married a German princess, his kids were 3/4 German. Second guy that married a German princess, they were 3/4 German. And then you can just multiply it out from there. They weren't really very Russian at all, but they were the Russian aristocracy, the monarchy. When people learn cultural practices by social learning or by modeling others, it is known as transmitted culture. So if you watch somebody do something, I watched Marius set up this PowerPoint projector. I had to watch it because I had tried to use it before and I couldn't figure it out. But I watched Marius do it, and now I can use it. But there's something missing, and I have to ask him. I'm going to see him tonight, so I'll ask him what the hell he did with that piece of. There's a cord that I can't find, but I know he stole it, or it probably belongs to him or something. Anyway, I learned how to use that by watching him use it, and that's transmitted culture, if you think about it. If you watch your neighbor growing tomatoes in a hanging pot, you have learned such planting practices by observation. And of course, I learned how to use that projector by watching Marius put his projector together. And actually, somebody else showed him how to do it. So he couldn't figure it out either. but he's smart enough that he asked somebody to show him how to use it. Despite the fact that the Dinka and the Nuer have lived beside each other for hundreds of years, and they are both nomadic cattle herders, and they eat the same foodstuffs and descended from the same ancestors 1,000 years ago, their cultures are completely different, even though they lived right beside each other, as confusing as that is. They both use scarification to identify themselves. I'm trying to remember which one's which. This is the Nuer and this is the Dinka. The Dinka have horizontal scars across their foreheads, and as you can see, the Nuer use chevrons for no reason whatsoever. The Nuer raise large herds of cattle and they live off the milk. The Dinka butcher their herds and rely on meat. The Dinka maintain tribal relationships with their families that they live near. The Nuer kinship is based on the male line. So if a Dinka and a Nuer intermarry, which doesn't happen, I guess we can't even talk about that because it never happens. There are so many differences between these two people that they can't even intermarry. One eats meat and the other drinks milk. They not only drink milk, but they flavor it with the cow's blood. So they'll cut the cow's artery in their neck and they'll bleed the blood into the milk, to make it richer. That sounds delightful, doesn't it? It's pink, so it's kind of fun. They don't kill the cow. They have to cut an artery it has to be oxygenated blood. So they just cut the artery. They know how to do it. They don't kill them. They don't want to kill them. They just want to drink their milk and drink their blood. I want to drink their blood. But they don't even follow the same kinship lines, as you can imagine. Northern Plains tribes they follow the male line. Aren't the Navajo matrilineal? Aren't you guys matrilineal? Okay, yeah, totally different. So if somebody from the north comes down here, a lot of confusion, just tons and tons of confusion. The Nuer are larger and they have militaristic tribes. They also have larger herds. And because they have larger herds, they have more money. And that allows them to buy more arms and ammunition. The Nuer maintain costly and flexible dowry payments for their daughters, while the Dinka have small, flexible payments. And so it makes it totally different. The two cannot get together. For one thing, their diet is completely different, and they couldn't do it. The other thing is the kinship would just destroy the relationship completely. Biological evolution occurs when certain genes become more common in a population than they were in the past. Biological evolution operates through natural selection. Natural selection is the evolutionary process that occurs under these conditions. The individual variability exists among members of a species on certain traits. The traits are associated with different reproductive rates. The rates have a hereditary basis. We can use skin tone as an example. Skin tone is different for select groups of individuals, but it is common in all species of humans. The traits are associated with different reproductive rates. Well, potentially it is. And actually that's what's going on right now, and that's what the argument is about immigration. The Caucasian, the white population in the United States is not growing. It's actually shrinking. And because it's shrinking, and there are white supremacists out there, they're afraid that they're going to lose their power in the United States. So what population is growing in the United States? What population is growing more than any other?
Hispanic.
I'm sorry?
Hispanic.
Hispanic population is growing. So they're scared to death of, I almost said something else. They're scared to death that they're going to lose their position in society. And this is one of the reasons why we've had this sudden influx of Antifa movements in the United States. Not the Antifa movements, but the anti-Antifa movements in the United States. The neo-Nazi movements, the white supremacist movements. And it's only going to get worse, unfortunately, because they don't want to lose their power in the United States. If we look at all the people in the United States Congress, how many of them are non-white? Not very many. There aren't very many minorities represented. But there will be with the next election. The next election is going to change everything completely. It's going to be fascinating. So this has become very important to select individuals. If we look at antelope, if we look at the Kalahari again, and we look at fast-running antelope, they are able to outrun their predators, and therefore they are able to survive because they can outrun their predators. But of course, there is a trade-off. Because of their muscle mass has to increase in order for them to run faster. They need more food stores. So because of that, they are vulnerable in times of famine. In times of drought, the fast-running antelope die out very quickly because they need the muscle mass. They need to eat a select amount of food every day in order to survive. However, there are slow-running antelope. They may be more susceptible to predators, of course, but in time of drought, their food sources are where the food sources are limited. These individuals with a larger body mass are more likely to survive. So there is a trade-off, and you never know what's going to happen next. The world does seem to be changing. We seem to be losing the polar ice packs. And because of that, the climate seems to be moving north. So what was hot, Arizona is hot right now, it's going to get hotter. And the temperate areas where we're growing all of our grain in the Midwest, all those areas will become like Arizona. It's going to be like desert. It's going to be deserty. So we're going to be growing all of our grain in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming. Those areas are going to become our grain bins. And the areas like Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois will become like deserts. That's what's happening right now. So things are constantly changing because of climate change, whether the Republicans want to admit it or not. Things do seem to be changing. We seem to be having more violent weather, and that has to do with climate change. Cultural evolution is where ideas are carried forward from generation to generation. Cultural evolution follows natural selection, as some ideas are more selectable in a culture than others. These types of ideas tend to be, two of these ideas tend to be religions and political structures. Every culture has a political structure. Every culture has a religion of one kind or another. And these are the types of cultural evolution. These are the types of cultural factors that tend to follow different groups, different cultural groups. And if you think of any group, can you think of any tribe that doesn't have religion and a political structure, and didn't have before Europeans forced them to have it? They had something. Everybody had something. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to stay together. And usually it was a religion and a culture. And that's what you're going to find about the Meskwaki. That was part of their strength, maybe, if you read that book. Okay, we need to stop right. No, we don't. Let's go. We got 3 minutes, don't we? Can't we keep going? One more slide. Come on, let's do one more slide. Okay. Coping errors are very common with cultural ideas. Coping errors or mutations are rare among genes, but they're common in cultures. Cultural copying errors. And this is what happened with swimming suits, bathing suits. Bathing suits changed over time. They evolved over time. And it's because of copying errors. In 1910, they didn't want you to show any skin whatsoever. In 1913, however, you could show your ankles and you could show your calves. As time went by, the bathing apparatus became smaller, and the areas of skin that were shown became larger, as you can see. So by 1919, after the end of World War I, they were showing their thighs, as shocking as that is. And by the 1940s, of course, they were showing even more than that, as odd as that may seem. And then today, if you go to the beach today, you won't see any of these bathing suits. None of them. They don't look anything like this. They look more like underwear than they do anything else. Travis just came back from Hawaii. What kind of bathing suits are people wearing on the beach, Travis? Two piece. There we go, 2 pieces, okay. Large pieces or small pieces? Dental floss?
Just a leaf.
A leaf, yeah, 2 leaves tied together, okay. So that's cultural errors, that's copying errors that have taken place over time. Why don't we stop right here, we'll pick this up next time. I was said I'd only do one.